It's swinging, supercharged 1968.
We really had faith in those times.
When revolution raged on the streets.
It was an extraordinary confrontation between young people and the police.
The small screen caused big outrage.
How was that ever allowed on television?
And the stage got steamy.
The nude scene, I suppose, was the big talking point.
It caused outrage that people were getting naked.
This was the year the 60s stopped being a gangster's paradise.
They're good to their mum. They must be good. No, they're murderers.
Sporting heroes risked everything.
He knew his life was over before he did it.
And blowing in the bag made drivers breathless with anger.
People were quite outraged.
How much have you been drinking? I should say 7.5 to 8 pints.
Get ready for a magical mystery tour through a truly outrageous 12 months.
It's the most 60s thing in the 60s.
Ain't nothing wrong with two people kissing.
With America's first family shaken by scandal.
Jackie, what have you done?
Then rocked by tragedy.
Twice in 5 years, a Kennedy has been struck down by a gunman.
So here we go.
The Berkeley campus is once more seething with revolt.
Rewinding some of the 60s most shocking moments.
It's the most consequential year that I ever lived through and reported.
These are the most extraordinary events in TV, film, show business and politics that were, controversially, 1968. Thumbs up, let's hitchhike back to 1968, the year when hordes of hippies descended on a tiny island off the south coast for the first Isle of Wight festival. Our pockets were a jangle with newfangled 5 and 10p pieces. While the greatest pop group in history were courting controversy at all points of the campus.
I think it's fair to say the Beatles are going through a bit of a vibe shift at this point in time, kind of transitioning.
They'd done all the music, all the records, and the touring, the screaming. They needed to do other things.
In just over 5 years, the Beatles had topped charts across the planet, effortlessly crossed over into movies, and blazed a trail as style icons.
That achieved so much, so where do you go from here?
Where they went, as 1967 became 1968, was London's Baker Street to open a fancy shop.
Oh, hey, why don't we have a boutique? How cool is that, man? How groovy is that?
Meanwhile, back in London, when the Beatles open a shop in Baker Street, everything slows down.
The Beatles shop was meant to sort of bring a piece of the Beatles to their fans.
When you're really famous, you can get talked into doing all sorts of things. So somebody obviously talked the Beatles into opening this shop, saying it'll be amazing, we'll sell your fashion, people will buy it.
It was all very much little tinkling bells, the sort of the Afghan coatie type, pongy things. And it was all very much sort of peace and love.
From its star-studded opening, this was a shop like no other, with money seemingly no object.
It looked very beautiful because they had this massive psychedelic flower power mural painted on the side of the whole of the building. But they were always kind of having a row with the council, who were very cross about this mural now and always trying to take it down.
The shop had opened for business in late 1967, but early in the new year was already getting into choppy waters.
Even though there was a lot of excitement about this Beatles shop, it wasn't a huge commercial success.
Part of the problem was a misjudgment with prices.
When people got into this shop, they found that a lot of the items were incredibly expensive. You know, a lot of the design made it very expensive. Even sometimes some of the labels inside were made out of silk, which put it out of the price range of many of their fans.
Too expensive, and they...
Although some shoppers soon came up with a solution for that.
The whole layout of the store was designed so that it made it very, very difficult to tell when anybody was shoplifting.
A lot of people were coming in and being quite light-fingered, and the staff in the shop were just not really equipped to deal with this level of shoplifting.
The staff with so much into the whole peace and love thing, nobody was ever prosecuted. Nobody ran down the road and said, oi. But that was the whole ethos, because they weren't in it to make money. They were in it to do something different. They must have lost money on it, but they had a lot of money to lose.
The shop's financial woes only worsened when the council insisted that the lavish artwork, which had been painted without planning permission, had to go.
Irony is, of course, if that mural still stood today, it would be like literally a huge tourist attraction the council would probably be making a lot of money off.
By the summer, unlike the mural, the writing was on the wall. It turned out that the Fab Four and the rag trade weren't exactly a match made in heaven.
The Beatles take the decision to close this very famous flagship store. But what they decide to do is, instead of sort of letting the receivers come in and take all the items, they decide to do something a bit controversial and a bit different. Everybody is allowed to come into the shop and take one item for free. An act of love and an act of defiance against the accountants and the bean counters.
There's something really sweet and simplistic about this idea doesn't work, we're losing lots of money, we'll give it away and we'll start afresh.
Although once more, idealistic blue sky thinking and messy reality turned out to be poles apart.
Oh, it's a dress.
You reckon it's a pretty expensive bit of stuff?
It's 9 guineas in the first place.
9 guineas? For nothing? What do you have?
I've got 3 dresses, actually.
3 dresses?
3, yeah.
What happens on the day is everyone gets wind that, you know, stuff is going for free.
Well, there wasn't really much on the top floor, but what I did get was this. What is it? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I think it's probably the top of a dressing gown.
The queues to get into the shop are absolutely phenomenal. Police officers like having to link arms to sort of keep the baying crowds out of the shop. And at the end, everything got taken from the shop, including people were like ripping up bits of carpet to take from the shop just to say that they had a piece of the Beatles.
The Baker Street boutique might have been going belly up in the West End, but in 1968, the ever-quizzical Beatles were already turning their attention east, away from the world of commerce to new causes for controversy, mysticism, meditation, and the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi.
They go to Rishikesh in North India to the ashram where the Maharishi is leading kind of like a training camp in meditation.
I think the Beatles going to India, it's not shock horror, but there's a lot of amusement and bafflement, you know.
It was seen as really faddish and way out, and what are the Beatles doing? They've completely lost it now. What is all this, like, Indian culture? And, you know, there's a bit of racism in that as well.
The four Beatles and their partners, plus other celebrated figures, including actress Mia Farrow and musician Donovan, all decamped to North India for a Maharishi masterclass in ways to turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream.
Wouldn't it have been a fabulous reality show? The Beatles in India with the Maharishi and all these people floating in and out? Wouldn't that have been fantastic?
The only way is enlightenment. The India trip was instigated by youngest Beatle, George.
What's really interesting for George is this was when he stepped out from being the junior Beatle to leading the band. So it's the first point in the Beatles' history when George leads the band. He says, let's all go to India.
Like the Spice Girls, the four Beatles had distinct personalities. Cute Beatle, angry Beatle, mystic Beatle, and tank engine Beatle. And they all reacted differently to the Indian experience.
Ringo stays there for about 10 days. He's not sure about the food.
Ringo just takes all his food out with him. He takes a suitcase full of baked beans. And after 2 weeks, he gets bored and goes home. Interestingly, though, to this day, Ringo still does transcendental meditation.
He has said over the years, you know, what it did give me was my mantra. And that's helped me, you know. So he's never kind of turned He's back on meditation.
Paul, he's there for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, gets bored, comes home, you know, probably goes back to producing Mary Hopkins, whatever he's doing at that point in time. But interestingly, he still does transcendental meditation to this day and is a vegetarian who's profoundly affected by his trip to India.
Then we get to John, who's like always looking for the answer with a capital A, who in some ways was the one most let down by the Maharishi and for a while the most disillusioned. He also saw the side to the Maharishi which enjoyed success and enjoyed buying a Mercedes, and there were also these rumours of impropriety with some of the female attendees at the ashram, but then there's a lot of dispute around that.
And Lennon's so let down because he put these people on a pedestal, you know, this is the ultimate father figure, he's a saint, he's brilliant, oh my God, he's just like the rest of us.
Lennon's disillusionment with the Maharishi would eventually surface in the song Sexy Sadie on the White Album.
Which was originally called The Maharishi, wasn't it? But George said, can you change the title of it? Because George really believed in the whole thing, and to his dying day.
By this point, the Beatles were like magpies, picking up anything interesting, then quickly discarding it. The Maharishi episode lasted little longer than the mural. But what seemed controversially out there in '68 is now considered a mainstream lifestyle choice.
Transcendental meditation was seen as a fad, but actually, you know, that's the thing that's really endured. Meditation is now standard practice for, in terms of people's well-being, and it's so much part of mainstream culture now. And it just goes to show how ahead of the curve the Beatles were.
Those trailblazing 60s keep on giving, with TV as trippy as the music.
People were up in arms, angry that they didn't get the ending they wanted.
And it was curtain up on controversy.
Things like this didn't happen on stage.
I think it was all about SEX.
About?
SEX.
We're reliving the tectonic turmoil of 1968, a year when a spirit of revolution swept the streets and our small screens, as a frankly bizarre drama reached a totally confounding climax.
Prisoner is one of the greatest series in British TV history.
The Prisoner was absolute product of its time. Sort of 67 into 68, things were changing, everything was changing. Black and white was becoming colour.
To help with US sales, The Prisoner bucked the TV production trends of '68 and was filmed in groovy Dayglow Technicolor. But here, we only saw the series in black and white on its original showing.
It looks great, all the characters are great, the mystery of it is great.
The driving force behind the series and the mystery was its brooding star, Patrick McGoohan. He'd become a household name as John Drake, a kind of small-screen James Bond, in popular spy drama Danger Man.
Patrick McGoohan was like this very, very handsome, charismatic actor who'd been Danger Man, and Danger Man was a sort of archetypal spy thriller of the early mid-60s. Fast cars, girls, linear plots, solving crimes fundamentally.
Good morning, Mr. Drake. Good morning, General. I came to see the Prime Minister at this hour. It must be a very urgent matter. It's important.
But McGoohan wanted something less linear and much less logical for The Prisoner.
The premise of The Prisoner is that a spy has tendered his resignation, but will not say why he's resigned, and so the authorities decide to kidnap him and send him to this weird place called the Village, which seems to be a retirement home for spies or a kind of prison. We don't even know where in the world it is or who the people there are, and it's patrolled by this strange balloon-like entity. Everybody is under surveillance.
Over 17 weeks from September 1967, the ITV audience had been drawn in by the increasingly labyrinthine plot.
I suppose you're wondering what you're doing here.
It had crossed my mind. What's it all about?
What is it about? Nobody really knows what it's about.
Sit down and I'll tell you.
To this day, each episode is bafflingly mysterious.
He's coming along nicely.
Each bewildering instalment saw McGowan's character in conflict with a mysterious village administrator figure known as Number 2, confusingly played each week by a different actor.
I'm sorry, I can never resist that.
Number 2 here.
I am the new Number 2.
Get Number 1.
As far as you're concerned, I'm in charge.
Everyone in the village was assigned a number, and McGowan's character was not happy about it.
Good day, Number 6.
Number what?
6. For official purposes, everyone has a number. Yours is Number 6.
I am not a number. I am a person.
6 of one, half a dozen of another.
It became more and more weird and experimental as it went on.
Pawn to Queen's 4.
How?
Pawn to Queen's 4.
How?
Pawn to Queen's 4. To the Queen's 4. To the Queen's 4.
We had been asking questions. Why was Number 6 Number 6? Why was Number 6 a prisoner? Where was the village? Who ran the village?
In a series that was all about enigma, the puzzle at its heart was the identity of Number 1.
Did you ever meet Number 1?
Face to face.
Yes.
Meet him?
On the 1st of February 1968, baffled viewers expected answers from the final episode, not more mind-bending puzzles. Guess what they got?
I think there was this feeling that if you stayed to the end, it's all going to be tied up in a neat bow.
And you finally think you're going to see who is behind the mask of the controlling entity of this environment. And he pulls it off, and it's a monkey, or a man in a monkey mask. And he pulls it off again, and it's him. That's how The Prisoner ends. It's the most 60s thing in the world. It's the most 60s thing in the 60s.
People were up in arms, angry that they didn't get the ending they wanted.
Years later, McGowan would memorably recall the outcry.
They became very incensed. In fact, I understand the switchboard at ATV was jammed overnight, and my children were molested coming from school, and the people beating on the door with mallets at my house. We had to go and hide in Wales for a couple of weeks in the hills with no telephones or any contact whatsoever with the outside world.
It was as confusing and messed up and mysterious and baffling as real life itself, and that's what really did people's heads in.
While The Prisoner was melting our minds on ITV, on the West End stage, a musical like no other called Hair was getting everyone hot under the collar.
Thing like Hair.
Anti-war, pro-drugs, very hippie.
People were dying in Vietnam, and it was probably the first protest musical.
When the moon is in the 7th house.
The Sound of Music, it wasn't, but rather hippie values, a sweary script, and artistic nudity, creating another generational divide in an era full of them.
I think it was all about SEX.
About?
SEX.
SEX.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
And I think there was too much groping went on.
Cast members in the eye of the storm had to grow a thick skin, and quick.
We get hettled, you know, and things like, and bits like where we say, oh, the army will make a man out of you, and shouts of here, and things like, I bet you don't use toilet roll and all that business, you know, which really makes you want to puke.
This was a show so controversial that it needed a change in the law to be allowed on stage at all. What had happened for many centuries was that all plays had to be submitted to the Lord Chamberlain, who was the official censor. And he would say what could and couldn't be put on the stage.
We were hoping to open in sort of June, July, but we were told that, unfortunately, they hadn't got the license for the show because of the nude scene and the four-letter words. So they took the decision to wait until the Theatre Act, which was the law that meant that the Lord Chamberlain could censor things, was abolished. And it was going to be abolished in September 26th, and the show opened on September 27th.
In future, plays will only need to be licensed by local councils. One of the first triumphs of this new freedom will undoubtedly be next Friday night at the Shaftesbury Theatre, when the American love rock musical Hair finally opens.
Give me a head with hair, long beautiful hair, shining, gleaming, streaming like sweat. Give me down to there.
Here's Paul Nicholas and co-star Oliver Tobias hyping up Hair on TV. Not that much hype was needed. Everyone knew that this show was changing the theatrical landscape.
Prior to that, you would have had, presumably, the police arriving and arresting everybody, the actors, the stage managers, probably the audience as well, because nudity was not allowed.
Oh, let the sun shine in. Why don't you learn to lean on me?
Whether they're coming simply to see arguably the best musical in town, or whether there is at the back of their mind the hint of a hope of glimpsing some incredible naked drug orgy, doesn't really seem to matter.
The show itself made the front pages not because of the brilliance of the show, but there's a moment when everyone in the cast takes off their clothes.
Yes, it was Hair's much heralded nude scene that gained the show instant notoriety.
It was like, blimey, Charlie, we can see nudity in a London theatre.
Things like this didn't happen on stage.
It caused outrage, absolute outrage, that people were getting naked.
The nude scene, I suppose, was the big talking point that everybody wanted to see, this nude scene. I was singing a song called Where Do I Go? Not that anyone was interested. And at the climax of the song, they all disappeared under this parachute and then stood up naked, if they wanted to.
What a lot of people don't realise is that the nude scene is optional. And the whole point of the nude scene, to be naked, is to be free. I don't do it because I don't believe that you have to be naked to be free.
I never had to do the nude scene. I was very, very happy about that, particularly looking around and seeing some of the competition. Thereafter, there were lots of other shows. We had O Calcutta, of course. There were a lot of shows that were demonstrating the freedom of being able to demonstrate nudity on stage. But the one thing that Hair had over all of those shows, it had a very strong anti-war message, and it had great songs.
There are more hair-raising happenings from '68 after the break, as motorists fought the legal limits.
This is my civil liberty. I should be allowed to do what I want to do.
And when Twin Terror fought the law won.
100 pairs of eyes on her as she points a trembling hand and says, "He did it."
In 1968, these happy quaffers were coming to terms with the widespread introduction of a divisive new gadget aimed at stopping this sort of thing.
Do you feel capable of driving away from here safely and well?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
How much have you been drinking?
I should say 7.5 to 8 pints.
It's hard to believe now, but the first breathalyzers were very, very controversial. People said, oh, you know, it's developing into a police state.
I think the whole thing's wrong, that you should be wheeled in willy-nilly to blow into a breathalyzer.
Up until that point, just as the Englishman's home was his castle, so his car was his sort of chariot. And he felt that whatever happened once he'd shut the doors of his car was none of your business.
When the breathalyzer was introduced, people were quite outraged. They thought, you know, this is my civil liberty. I should be allowed to do what I want to do.
If the driver refuses to take this test, he may be arrested without a warrant and he becomes liable to a fine of up to £50.
The moral force that there is now applied to not drinking and driving wasn't there. It was regarded by an awful lot of motorists as a game. The police might stop you, but they might not.
So let's take a look back at the tried and tested methods police once used to spot drink drivers. There was the let's see you walk in a straight line test. Or, to make it really scientific, how about the can you touch your nose with your eyes shut challenge?
Drink driving was not frowned upon back then. It was kind of considered a bit macho and, you know, and quite normal, really.
Our generation sort of started off by having, well, if you were a girl, you could have 3. If you were a man, you could have 5.
I remember loads of people saying, oh, no, I drive much better when I'm drunk.
You may feel perfectly OK, but actually, you know, your reactions are slowed, even if you don't think they are. They are. That message took a long time to get across.
After the 1967 Road Safety Act, early 68 saw a first portable roadside breathalyzer receive Home Office approval.
Is that the best you can do? Take a deeper breath.
Motorists were up in arms, and some, outraged at no longer being able to hit the roads hammered, sent hate mail to Transport Minister Barbara Castle. The breathalyzer led to an initial dip in pub takings, and disgruntled owners were predicting ruin.
In the first week, well, it was so drastic that I didn't know what to do with myself. On Saturdays, which was our big day, it's halved our takings.
People said, well, it's going to kill the country pub trade. The expression one for the road, you know, suddenly it was gone.
The licensed trade said that if you couldn't drive to the pub and then drive home drunk afterwards, no one would go.
For motorists pulled over by the police after a skinful, a series of urban myths emerged as to how you might avoid a positive reading.
There's been various tips on beating the breathalyzer over the years. I kind of sort of dimly remember that peppermints was there.
The other myth that surrounded it was that if you were in danger of being stopped, the best thing to do was to have a pint of milk.
You could drink the milk and it would turn the alcohol to cheese in your stomach.
And then I think there was something about eating mashed potato, which, if I've remembered that correctly, does seem completely bizarre because you probably don't carry that around in your car.
Neither milk nor mash experienced a surge in sales, and pubs weren't reduced to empty shelves overnight. But this little tube really was saving lives.
I think it would be wrong to say there's one sole reason for a reduction in accidents, but I think there's no doubt that this is the principal reason for this dramatic improvement.
The fact that the year afterwards there were 1,100 less deaths on the road should be an indication that you probably shouldn't have been driving after, 4 pints, 3 whiskey chasers and a brown ale.
One great thing is that this generation, this new young generation, definitely do not drink and drive, whereas I think that generation back then did. So now they don't, which is a great thing.
But it wasn't just technology aimed at catching drunken motorists that was making the streets safer in '68. As that May, a swoop on this London tower block saw the police feeling the collars of the era's 2 most notorious gangsters, the Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie.
More than 100 detectives of London's regional crime squad and of the fraud squad carried out the arrests in a series of raids which began just before dawn this morning. Among the first to be brought in were the 34-year-old Kray twins, Reginald and Ronald, and their brother, Charles Kray.
The arrests brought to an end the brothers' decade-long criminal stranglehold on parts of the capital. This documentary from the time about their terrifying reign of violence was the era's equivalent of a true crime story.
One of the firms got the gun on Alan and he said, if you don't pay, he said, we're going to shoot one of your men every week. He said, he can go now, he said, if you want to be funny.
Fear played a large part in it. And I think this is because they always did what they threatened. I mean, there was no messing about. If they threatened to do a thing, it was done.
And with that, he's pulled out a flick knife and struck the man right across the face. You had to have about 30 stitches, 36 stitches, something like 32 stitches, I'm not quite sure. That was it.
I think we're fascinated by Ronnie and Reggie for all sorts of reasons. Partly because they're twins. And twins, everybody knows, are strange and fascinating.
Yes.
How much has this trial cost you?
It's cost us roughly £8,000.
And how do you feel about that?
I don't suppose anyone likes the idea of spending that money for no reason at all, you know.
The Krays were unique. But essentially, the key to the Krays is that they were one man in two bodies. The strength of their personality. It's all right to talk about everything being based on fear. It wasn't just fear, it was personality. It was something very, very much larger than life.
The East End at that time kind of had its own rules. It probably thought it didn't need the police because they would sort out their own business.
London's East End has always been a breeding ground for criminals. But the big-time gangsters, as opposed to the small-time crooks, were a new phenomenon in London. They were men who ran whole empires of criminal activity. They ruled by violence and fear.
Key to what was euphemistically called the Krays' business empire were protection rackets. And here's a likely lad to talk us through them.
Protection is quite a simple thing. Disturbances are caused deliberately in clubs, pubs, gambling casinos, to cause worry to the owners. And then people just offer or they're asked to protect them. And then it goes on, it grows.
Protection rackets were to protect your pub. You give us some money and it means no one can touch your pub. When really they're the only threat of touching the pub.
And how much did you pay?
£40 a week.
For how long?
Approximately 10 years.
So that means you've paid out something like £20,000?
In that region, yes.
That's around £300,000 today. But the Krays and their thugs were people who made offers you couldn't refuse.
They projected, in fact, an aura of fear. They were, in this country, what the old-style Chicago gangster was in America.
Like their US mobster heroes, the Krays hid their vicious operation behind the veneer of being legitimate businessmen.
In all clubs you get an occasional drunk, you know, and sometimes they have to be slung out, and that's why there's doormen and that, but I suppose it's nightclub land all over the world, really. Most clubs are very respectable, you know, and I don't think there's any trouble at all in them, except occasionally.
There was a strange collision of the gangster world and the kind of glamorous world of celebrity and entertainment, and there was a kind of celebrity attached to the Kray twins because of who they hung out with. The Kray twins had their own nightclub, and it was a very glamorous place to be. So Frank Sinatra would go to Judy Garland, Dinah Dawes, Joan Collins, you name it, the celebrities hung out in this place.
They were kind of swinging 60s characters in some ways. So they're up there with, you know, Michael Caine and Twiggy as these kind of slightly wide working class characters who've made it through from a very poor background.
They were so glamorised that even David Bailey photographed them with that really iconic shot with the two of them standing side by side, one just behind the other.
I do not understand why would you take a photograph of a couple of crooks? Bad crooks. People who inflicted an awful lot of harm.
And that image of the kind of, you know, the one with the brother over the shoulder, that is so enduring now that was a Radio Times cover not too far back with Dirty Den and Richard Hillman off Corrie. And that was the big soap thing, and they had two soap villains, storylines climaxing at the same time. And the Radio Times have gone, what should we do to illustrate this? Let's recreate the famous David Bailey Krays photograph. That's how enduring their legacy is.
And it wasn't just the 60s showbiz set the twins were setting out to charm. These hardened East End street criminals also found a welcome in the corridors of power.
They did what no real criminals had done before in Britain, which was to cultivate one or two politicians. They did it very effectively. I mean, Ronald had lunched, I think, on certainly 2 occasions, possibly more, at the House of Lords. He went to several London clubs, which are very respectable London clubs. He knew a certain number of very highly placed political figures in the country.
For a decade, from the mid-1950s, their connections helped the Krays hold sway with impunity over large parts of the capital.
The Kray twins were very feared, and any story that would be about to break, because of course everything was via newspapers back then, they were just shut down. They had the ability, they had people everywhere. Or they made us feel that they had people everywhere.
I think there was a sort of let them get on with it attitude at that time. Plus the fact that, you know, the Metropolitan Police were as bent as they were, or certainly some of them were. And so for a long time, providing they kind of, you know, they stayed within their ghetto, they were sort of allowed to get away with it.
Some still believe the Kray myth. Not thugs, just harsh but fair vigilantes bending the rules to keep the East End safe.
There was always a narrative that they were good people because they sorted the bad people out. That was the idea, that they were, you know, like the Robin Hoods for the 60s.
This, oh, you knew where you were with the Krays. They were only robbing their own, was one line. They loved their mum, was another line.
They're good to their mum, they must be good. No, they're murderers.
These were still essentially street thugs, really. And as much as, you know, you can wax lyrical about them, these are not good men.
But while the Krays were as much part of swinging London as the miniskirt, behind the scenes their taste for violence was out of control. So much so that the pair, believing themselves above the law, committed 2 brutal murders.
Ronnie Kray walked openly into the bar of the Blind Beggar and shot one of the Richardson gang dead in full view of the customers. Friends say George Cornell was killed because he was one of the few men who stood up to the Krays. There was another reason, though. By choosing to commit murder in public, Ronald Kray was trying to prove that he was supreme gang leader in London, that he too could kill and get away with it. It almost worked, as it did when he and Reggie lured Jack McVitie, a small-time criminal, to a flat and stabbed him to death.
Their Old Bailey trial began in early 1969 and held the nation enthralled, generating such interest that tickets were being sold for the viewers' gallery, on the black market, obviously.
And from the witness box, some horrifying stories. The twins' former henchman who saw Jack McVitie murdered. Quote, Reggie got the knife and stuck it in McVitie's face. He stuck it in his stomach. Then he got astride and stuck it in his throat and twisted it. Or the unfortunate barmaid at the Blind Beggar who saw Ronald Kray shoot George Cornell dead in front of the customers. After 3 years of private nightmares and a life spent in hiding, the day comes when she has to face Ronald Kray across the courtroom. 100 pairs of eyes on her as she points a trembling hand and says, he did it.
Facing overwhelming evidence, in March '69, the Krays were sent down for life. But even with the brothers behind bars, a grim fascination with the pair continued.
One of them actually served 8 years in a prison in my constituency. I was very, very well aware that there was a Kray there.
Showbiz and the Krays had been strange bedfellows in the 60s and remained so. Both Richard Burton and James Fox visited Ronnie in jail to research gangster roles. And the twins' story proved perfect for the big screen, notably in 1990, when the charismatic Kemp brothers got tooled up for the role.
We haven't got an umbrella either. That's always the way. That's a joke. Do you see me laughing?
And in 2015, when Tom Hardy gave a bravura performance playing both brothers in Legend.
He knows too much about things. Things about us, Reggie knows too many things about us.
Knows too many things about us. Right, Albie, do you know things about us, mate? You know things, eh?
When the Kray twins died, Ronnie in 1995 and Reggie in 2000, thousands of EastEnders turned out to line the streets that the infamous brothers had once terrorised.
Huge cortege. Enormous queue of mourners in the East End.
It feels an especially British thing is how we eulogise gangsters.
I do not understand how the Krays could command, I won't say the respect, but the awe, if you like, that they did undeniably inspire. You could no way regard them as some sort of folk hero, but they were treated as such by the EastEnders.
More evil incarnate after the break, as the 60s big screen controversially takes on Hitler and even the devil himself.
People look back and they go, it's so inappropriate, and how can they have done this?
Mel Brooks was like, I'm Jewish. Leave me alone. I'm just being funny.
We're revisiting the controversies of swinging 1968, when revolution and dissent broke out in major cities across the globe. But in a quiet apartment in New York, something truly wicked was coming to cause one unholy big-screen controversy.
The basic plot of Rosemary's Baby is the Mia Farrow character is married to her sweetheart, and they're very much setting up home.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Fireplace works, of course.
They move into this apartment in New York.
Oh, it's a wonderful apartment.
Seems a bit too good to be true.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. May I come in a minute?
Yes, of course, please do.
And who are these neighbours that are taking such an interest in them?
This evening I made a little too much and rather angry. Ah, there we are. No. Sit down, please.
But the domestic pleasantries very soon give way to something altogether more nightmarishly sinister.
Such a chilling atmosphere and a very compelling premise about a young woman who believes that her elderly neighbours are actually witches or Satanists, and they have designs on her unborn baby.
The essence of it was that she had a baby courtesy of the devil, and there was therefore a controversy.
There's this scene in it which is a kind of dream sequence where Mia Farrow's character appears to be raped by the devil. This is shocking. This is difficult.
Obviously, you play with religion and you put sex into the equation, then there are going to be a lot of groups who are up in arms.
This is no dream. This is really happening.
This was still quite a religious society. The Church of England still played a very, very dominant role and hadn't yet fallen apart. And so there was an awful lot of controversy as to whether such a film should have been made, should be shown, who should see it, etc.
What's kind of slightly worrying when you look at the film now is the inferences and the kind of way they deal with the issue of rape.
The dreams I had.
Don't yell. I already filed them down.
She comes to and she sort of said, I had this dream. I had this dream where I think there was this figure, you know, having sex with me. And then her husband says, yeah, well, it was me.
I didn't want to miss baby night. And a couple of my nails were ragged, and it was kind of fun in a necrophile sort of way.
You think you've just drugged her and raped her, you know? Yeah, I think we see it now, maybe in a different way.
The film follows the course of Rosemary's pregnancy and her ever-increasing worries about the baby she's carrying.
We're with her. It's about her confusion. It's about this pregnancy that she suddenly finds herself with baby under very curious circumstances.
It was like an interior landscape, so you're in the mind of this young wife
Be gone. I will have no more of thee.
You're in her head, you're suspecting along with her, and you're maybe a little ahead of her because you know you're watching what is essentially a horror movie.
It's alive! Guy, it's moving. It's alive, it's all right. Feel.
And it taps into some very deep parts of, to me, you know, the female psyche.
It's all right. It's good for her. Let her cry it out. It's all right, darling. It's all right. Sit down. Sit down.
The suspense is built beautifully. Everything rests on Mia Farrow's performance here. I think she is incredible. There's something so watchable about her. You can't take your eyes off her, and you're with her in every moment because this is a film that is from her point of view primarily.
Dr. Hill? Dr. Hill, there's a plot. I know that sounds crazy. You're probably thinking, oh my God, this poor girl is really flipped. But I haven't flipped, Dr. Hill. I swear, by all the saints, I haven't.
Off camera, the actress playing Rosemary, Mia Farrow, found herself dealing with marital problems of her own. She had been a 21-year-old TV soap star when she'd married Frank Sinatra, almost 30 years her senior, and of the opinion that being Mrs. Sinatra was a much more important role for Mia than her burgeoning acting career.
Sinatra saying, I don't want you to do this film. You're not meant to work. You're married to me.
While the film was being made, Sinatra didn't think that she should work, to the extent that he actually strode in on set with divorce papers.
Something had to give, and in the end, that something was Mia Farrow's marriage to Sinatra. Rosemary's Baby was the role that propelled her into the movie Big League. Although for contemporary viewers, the picture is muddied by shocking later events in the life of the man who directed it.
When we look at the film now, it's really complicated by what we know now about the director, Roman Polanski, who was tried for raping a 13-year-old, and he fled the country to avoid imprisonment. So we kind of have those overtones.
He's controversial, he is talented, but when you're aware of both those things, I think it's hard not to keep them both in mind when you're watching one of his films. So while I would praise this film in many ways, I've still got in the back of my mind the awareness of who's made it.
And in Taboo toppling 1968, there was more Manhattan movie mayhem on the way, courtesy of the controversial Breakthrough release from a comedy legend who may divide opinions, but who's never been afraid to put his head above the parapet.
Some of your jokes have offended people from time to time. How do you feel about that?
What I feel is that we the filmmakers, should not be restricted by anything but our own personal sense of morality and how that fits into the present work that we're involved in.
So let's talk about the offence caused by Mel's first feature film, The Producers. Meet theatrical impresario Max Bialystock. He's as seedy and unpleasant as his comb-over, and just like it, he's failing to hide his problem.
It's about a producer who makes his living sort of putting on plays and sort of romancing elderly women who give him money.
Don't forget the checkie. Can't produce plays without checkies.
You can count on me, you dirty young man.
A bloke arrives called Leo Bloom, played by Gene Wilder, who is this sort of shy, nebbish accountant.
It's absolutely amazing. But under the right circumstances, a producer could make more money with a flop than he could with a hit.
He says what would actually be a really good idea would be if you put on a truly terrible show and got all your little old ladies to back it and give you tons and tons and tons and tons of money, and then you would not have to give any of the money back because the show would be such a flop and you could keep the money.
The big challenge for the Max and Leo odd couple was finding a surefire, guaranteed theatrical flop. And that's when the controversy started.
Springtime for Hitler. A gay romp with Adolf and Eva at Berchtesgaden. Wow. Wow.
It's practically a love letter to Hitler.
They find a play about Hitler, which is written very sincerely by a Hitler sympathizer.
This won't run a week. A week? Are you kidding? This play is got to close on page 4.
They have to find the playwright, and
they found him, then visited him on the roof, where he was talking to his pigeons.
He's wearing a German helmet.
Don't say anything to offend him. We need that play.
This man is utterly doolally. He's going around in a square helmet and Nazi memorabilia everywhere.
Sergeant! With his cigars. Look, it's plenty. And it's rotten painting, rotten! Hitler, there was a painter. He could paint an entire apartment in one afternoon, 2 coats!
Then they have to audition the Hitlers.
If everybody in the world today had a flower instead of a gun, there would be no wars.
Along comes this mad sort of hippie character who sings a song about flowers.
Flower.
That's our Hitler!
The centerpiece of it is this fantastic Busby Berkeley type kaleidoscopic production number.
Of course, it offended some people at the time. Some people thought it was tasteless. Some people thought it was anti-Semitic.
I think some people would still find the producers controversial. I think some people would feel that it's never okay.
You start off with the audience's faces of just, what's going on? What's happening?
Liet meer nicht. Liet meer nicht. Du liet meer nicht.
And then the odd kind of, like ripple of laughter because it's so bad, it's good.
Hey, man. I leave you, baby. I leave you. Now leave me alone.
Harry, he's funny.
And then the audience just takes over, and it is this absolute avalanche of laughter.
The play here is in progress. You must be quiet. Train!
All singing, all dancing Hitler was a smash and a disaster for our anti-heroes.
Well, so far, that's about one of the funniest things I've ever seen on Broadway.
I never laughed so much in my life.
Reviewers of the film were less impressed. The premiere of The Producers in Pittsburgh was such a disaster, it put the film's nationwide US release in jeopardy. After public support from comedy giant Peter Sellers, distribution was ensured, but the critics remained hostile.
It had really divisive reviews when it was originally released.
This was 23 years after the end of the war, after they'd liberated the camps, after they'd realised the scale of the Holocaust. And Brooks is addressing Hitler, the Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and all those things that, let's just not talk about it, shall we? He's like, no, let's talk about it.
Brooks kept talking and laughing all the way to the Oscars.
And the winner is Mel Brooks for The Producers.
This debut film won him a Best Screenplay Oscar, and Time has been the ultimate critic. Both the movie and its spin-off stage musical are considered classics.
Mel Brooks was like, I'm Jewish. Leave me alone. I'm just being funny.
Joseph, you are smoking in the presence of the Fuhrer.
I'm sorry, Big Daddy.
They try. Man, how they try.
People look back and they go, it's so inappropriate, and how can they have done this? But it was funny.
1 and 1 is 2. 2 and 2 is 4. I feel so bad because I'm losing the war.
After the break, controversy and tragedy hit the world's most famous family in 1968.
What's she doing? couldn't it have been a nice American chap?
You look at the surroundings, and could there have been a second gunman? Who knows?
We're stirring the cauldron of controversy that was 1968. The year when America's most glamorous and famous widow shocked the entire planet with a marriage to husband number 2 that nobody saw coming.
Jackie Kennedy just epitomized glamour and sophistication.
She was such a star to people, an icon and an idol.
She was copied for her clothes and her dress sense. Everything she did was recorded, and she was treated very much, almost as if she was still the First Lady.
Jackie became First Lady to President John F. Kennedy in 1961 and quickly changed the world's perception of what a First Lady could and should be.
She had an extraordinary effect, not just of how she looked, but of what she represented, which was somebody fresh. John Jr. would be under the desk while his father was taking calls on his phone. You know, all of those images.
And the world marveled at her poise and grace at his funeral.
For the 5 years after John F. Kennedy's assassination, Jackie Kennedy was seen as being this very dignified widow, mourning John F. Kennedy, looking after the children, living a private life. She was the repository of all of America's grief.
I think people just so revered her for the way she handled it, the way she lived her life. And then suddenly that all blew apart. I'm not sure people minded her getting married again because, you know, she'd been widowed, she was still a young, beautiful woman, she's got 2 children. And I think that the right man would have been fine.
There was some talk about that she might marry one of Jack's great friends, who was the British ambassador in Washington at the time, Lord Harlech, very charming English aristocratic type. Instead of which she rushed off and married this hooligan called Aristotle Onassis.
It was like, how could she, this elegant, unbelievable woman, be marrying this sort of Greek shipping magnate?
You put those together, and it's almost like names out of a hat. She's marrying him.
Onassis was owner of a shipping line, immensely wealthy, with a fairly flamboyant private life.
Very, very rich Greek shipping millionaire who loved nothing better than getting sozzled with his mates on ouzo and watching strippers dance. So he was quite the antithesis of Camelot.
Onassis was very much the cliche, the kind of bonk-buster cliche of the medallion-wearing rich guy. Very much a collector. He collected beautiful things, he collected beautiful women. He had a great love affair with the opera singer Maria Callas.
The thing is, Onassis simply liked to claim prizes, and that was a great prize. Jacqueline Kennedy was a vanity project, but at the cost of someone who really loved him. Maria Callas adored Onassis. They were a great couple. And it broke Maria Callas's heart. You could understand why Jackie Kennedy did it. She needed protection. But the point is, it wasn't love.
Whatever it was controversial. The American press and populace were in disbelief.
The cry at the time was, Jackie, why? Jackie, what have you done? You belong to us. You belong to us, the American people. What have you done?
What's she doing? You know, couldn't it have been a nice American chap? Couldn't even been another president.
People were really shocked because they expected Jackie to mourn forever. People expected Jackie to be a Kennedy until the end of her days, to be this tragic figure.
I think what Jackie did was to decide for herself, to put her well-being and the well-being of her children first.
If you're 39, why would you not remarry? If that's on your radar, if you're being courted by the world's richest man, you've got yachts a go-go, diamonds as big as pigeons. Why would you not?
Jackie's marriage might have made waves in 1968, but there was another hammer blow that hit the Kennedy family that year, in the form of a devastating event where history seemed to repeat itself.
Give me your help.
In 1968, Robert Francis Kennedy was hoping to follow his brother into the presidency.
Bobby was young. He was young, in his 40s. And had that great voice, that great charisma, the confidence.
We'll have a new country, a new state of California, and we'll make a new day for mankind with your help. Thank you very much.
He was John Kennedy's younger brother, and he was the Attorney General when Jack was the president.
I run for the presidency because I want the Democratic Party and the United States of America to stand for hope instead of despair.
It was like a possibly happy ending to a sad story. A Democratic presidential hopeful running to finish what his tragic brother had started. Could a second Kennedy make the White House?
I think he's a far more impressive man at 42 than his brother was at exactly the same age when he became president.
He was forward-looking, he was progressive, he was young, and so he probably, for a lot of Democrats in America, spelt hope, change, kind of a rejuvenation.
Among the young in particular, RFK, as he became known, was a breath of fresh air in American politics, although others were less keen on this young man seeking change.
In his time as Attorney General, arrests and convictions for organized crime had gone up by 800%. So he'd made a lot of enemies in the crime syndicate world. He was against the Vietnam War and wanted America to withdraw.
If we weren't spending $30 billion on Vietnam, then some of that money could be used here in the United States.
So he'd made a lot of enemies in the armaments world. He was for school integration and racial integration, so he'd made a lot of enemies in the South.
Early on June the 5th, Robert Kennedy had just addressed jubilant supporters in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles after a potentially crucial victory in the California primary vote, when the unthinkable happened.
Robert Kennedy finished thanking his supporters and workers. All around him was jubilation and excitement. He turned with his wife to move from the platform. A number of shots rang out, and Kennedy fell to the ground, wounded in the head. There was total confusion, with unheard or unheeded calls for doctors, for people to clear the room. At this point, it seemed that Kennedy was still conscious.
I can still see the picture of him lying on that floor with people surrounding him, somebody with a jacket under his head. And apparently he said, "Is everybody okay?" Which is kind of really indicative of the man.
Soon after, Kennedy lost consciousness and died a day later. It didn't seem possible.
Twice in 5 years, a Kennedy has been struck down by a gunman.
This was terrible.
I don't believe it.
I was shocked beyond words, I really was. It's just unbelievable that the same thing could have happened twice in the same family.
As with the shooting of his brother John, speculation rages to this day over what exactly happened that night.
There were people there who said that 11 shots or 13 shots were fired. And when you listen to audio recordings of it, it's at least 10 or more that were fired. But the gun that was in the hand of the man who is still in prison for assassinating him fired 8 shots.
Sirhan, 23 years old, as the name of the person arrested.
The fatal shots appeared not to have come from the direction that Sirhan was firing.
You look at the surroundings, and could there have been a second gunman? Who knows? There was, the kind of conspiracy theories. Could the CIA have been involved?
What's not in doubt is the effect that this latest in a series of blows had on America.
Assassinations and attempted assassinations have become tragically familiar in the United States of America.
One of the things that's most shocking about Bobby Kennedy's assassination is that it was the 4th major assassination in the 1960s. In America, JFK is killed. Then Malcolm X is killed.
And then Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy within 8 weeks of each other in '68.
The question being asked all the time is, do you think there's something basically wrong with our society? And the answer usually given is yes.
I think those assassinations together completely changed the complexion, not just of America, but of the world. Those assassinations made people believe that change could never happen because anybody who raised their voice was going to have that voice silenced.
On the way, uncomfortable opinions in comedy.
I knew Alf Garnett's. Some of your teachers were Alf Garnett's. You meet lots of Alf Garnett policemen.
And in sport, a heroic stand that shook the world.
It was just literal hate. Why don't you just run and keep your mouth shut?
We're reliving the unforgettable events from seismic 1968 that hit the headlines and had jaws hitting the floor. It's the year of one of the most controversial moments ever in sporting history, one that still resonates to this day.
Well, on Saturday, the world's largest sporting international event begins. It happens only once every 4 years, and it is the Olympic Games.
The Mexico Olympics were rife with controversy.
There's never been an Olympic Games quite like it.
Apartheid-era South Africa found its invitation withdrawn after other nations threatened a mass boycott. Then we saw the first instance of anti-doping measures.
It's the first time in the history of the Olympics that there'll be full-scale checks against athletes using dope or drugs to improve their performances.
So, which chemical enhancement was picked up first? Steroids? Amphetamines? No. Swede Hans-Gunnar Liljenwall was disgraced. When tests revealed that before the modern pentathlon shooting, he'd taken a couple of beers to steady his nerves. They should have just breathalyzed him. But the enduring image of that year's Games is of a seriously controversial moment that took place not on the sports field, but on the medal podium.
I'm looked down upon by probably most Americans because of my feelings I conveyed those feelings in Mexico City.
The medal ceremony of the 1968 Olympics 200 meters final was a moment that I, as a child, will never forget.
I don't remember seeing the race itself, but the image of what happened during the medal ceremony is burnt onto my retina or my memory.
Tommy Smith, the winner, and John Carlos, the bronze medalist from America, both lifted their hands in Black Power salute.
You could hear the gasp. There was a gasp in the front room where I was. I'm like, why? What's happened? What's happened? And then all this booing in the crowd, and I'm saying to...
And they stood there and they bowed their heads and they raised their arms in a clenched fist salute. You do have to put it into the context of the American politics of the time. This is 1968. This is at the height of the civil rights movement, of the emergence of the Black Panthers, and of still vicious and murderous racism in America. People were still being gunned down for wearing black berets, essentially. And for them to have done that in the face of what they knew would come as a result, I think is heroic. But at the time, they were ostracized and criticized, and effectively their careers were over at that point. But I think they knew that. I think they knew that what they were doing was kind of earth-shattering.
It's well documented that Smith and Carlos paid a heavy price for the protest.
People stayed away from me like the flu.
Oh, really?
Yes, they did. The non-blacks did for their reason, and the blacks did it for their reasons also.
Which were?
Don't bother me because I got this job and I don't want to lose it. That was the black reason. And the white reason was just literal hate.
Yes.
And you boys shouldn't have done what you did. It wasn't the right place to do it. You was there to win, and you got a free education, so why didn't you just run and keep your mouth shut?
Not keeping their mouths shut led to both losing their jobs, never running for the US again, and receiving death threats.
Some of us had rocks thrown through our windows. Some of us had pet animals killed.
But there were 3 men on that podium. So what of the other athlete that night?
The controversy is not the black guys that holding up their fist. It's the white guy that had the balls to support them, where 99.99% of them ain't got those minerals.
Peter Norman, who was the silver medalist from Australia, wore a human rights badge in support of them.
The Australian that supported them and who went back to Australia and was treated like a piece of garbage because of it. That's the controversial part of that story.
Like the American pair, Norman's career suffered. On his return to Australia, he said he was treated like a pariah. And many are convinced that his exclusion from the next Olympic team 4 years later was all down to what happened in Mexico.
He knew his life was over. Before he did it, he knew, I'm fucked. And he was when he got back to Australia. But the telling moment of that is the black guys going all the way from America to go and carry his coffin in Australia.
In 2006, when Peter Norman died, Tommy Smith and John Carlos were among his pallbearers.
Australian TV news footage from the time captured the moving scenes when the pair paid their respects to the man who'd shared the podium with them in that 1968 moment that was controversial then, but seen as hugely significant today.
We fast forward now to the taking of the knee and the Black Lives Matter movement and how important that is in sport.
Their action is now seen with the benefit of hindsight and through the lens of history as shining a light on racial injustice and actually being a significant moment in the civil rights fight.
If you had to go up on that rostrum again to collect your medal, would you stage that demonstration again?
It's kind of hard to say stage that demonstration again because that demonstration came at the spur of the moment on a feeling. But something would definitely have to be done, and I would probably do something.
Back in the UK, race was a big issue too in 1968.
It's hard now to remember just how commonplace and accepted racism was back then.
I went to school past the shops with the signs in the newsagents' windows, room to let, no Irish, no dogs, no blacks.
You had people able to say, I won't employ a black person. It was unbelievable, actually.
Enter the star of one of 68's most popular sitcoms, a bigoted little Englander with several serious chips on his shoulder.
Alf Garnett was very controversial, but lots of people, including me, didn't take him very seriously.
What's the fish like today, then?
Shut up!
Do you want some of my meat pudding, Dad?
No, thanks!
We looked at Till Death Us Do Part thinking, oh, this is sort of an interesting slice of working-class life.
Go on, Vashti! Go on, my old son, put your spurs in! Go on in, here he goes! He's gonna do it! Go on, Vashti! He's done it! He's done it, my little darling! What a lovely horse!
On many topics, the world view of this traditionalist bigot was very much of its time.
It's all here, Sonny, in a good book in black and white, and so we didn't crawl out from under stones, and we never had tails, and we wasn't never bloody monkeys neither, you scarskit!
We, comfortable middle-class folk, didn't realise the extent to which our fellow citizens, many of them, were extremely upset by this.
The good Lord made us in his own image. Do you mean God looks like you?
Religion, class, race, Alf was an equal opportunities bigot. He hated everything. But in the 1968 episode, The Blood Donor, Garnett's racism came to the fore in what is difficult viewing today.
I happen to be fussy about who I give my blood to. See, before I give any of my blood away, Sonny, I want to know who it's going to.
He doesn't want his blood to go to someone who's not white. And he doesn't want not white blood in him.
I bet you wouldn't be so fussy, though, if it was you who needed blood, would you? Hey.
Yeah, well, I'd like to know who it'd come from, mate, because I don't want any old Tom, Dick or Harry's blood in me, mate.
Oh, you're ignorant, you are. You're really ignorant.
And, you know, that is a huge concept. That's a lot to kind of process and deal with. There's so many things wrong with that.
Next stop for Alf was a hugely controversial scene at the blood clinic.
That clip is very, very powerful because it's so simple. It's two guys in a queue. He's going to give blood. He looks down the line. He sees a black man at the end of the line. Now, you know in an instant what he's thinking.
I mean, no, bung his blood into anybody?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? How do you do?
And I think that's what happened with some of our neighbours. We thought, that's what they're thinking.
That's literally how people felt about foreigners in the country. And it's shocking.
I knew Alf Garnetts. Some of your teachers were Alf Garnetts. You meet lots of Alf Garnett policemen.
While many expressed disquiet at the episode, the problem was that there were plenty of others who didn't get that Alf was meant to be satirical, seeing him more as a spokesman.
He was playing a comedy monster, but unfortunately, a lot of the audience thought he's got a lot of common sense, this Alf Garnett.
What happens is that there are enough of those people out there that Alf Garnett becomes something of a hero, much to the genuine distress of Johnny Speight, the writer, and Warren Mitchell, the actor. What Johnny and Warren were trying to do was to say, can you believe the stupidity of somebody taking this position?
Whatever the intention in creating Alf Garnett, putting bigoted views into the mouth of a comedy character in 1968 was playing with fire. And the debate over Alf Garnett rages on to this day.
Looking back, it's amazing that the BBC put it out at all.
You've got to put it into the context of the 60s. You've got to understand that there was a backlash in this country about black people taking jobs on the buses or serving in shops or whatever. It was outrageous, but it happened. And comedy's job is to prick that bubble. But if you watch it in isolation, you know, oh my God, what? Because we're watching it from our modern perspective, and it's not made for our modern perspective.
You just go, how was that ever allowed on television?
While Alf Garnett was spouting hatred in East London, out in deepest space when it came to race relations, it was all about peace and love, especially with one classic clinch that sent shockwaves across the known universe. William Shatner, a.k.a. James T. Kirk of the Enterprise, had passed form. In the 79 episodes of the groundbreaking original Star Trek series, we were never far away from regular instances of captain ends up smooching with crew member or even sometimes an alien. But for one 1968 episode, the writers decided to boldly go into uncharted territory.
It seems extraordinary now that this was perceived as controversial in any sense whatsoever. You know, the two best-looking characters on Star Trek have a snog.
So there was to be a kiss between Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura, who was black. No big deal today. Not in '68. That year, the US Bible Belt howled damnation when Petula Clark and Harry Belafonte dared to touch during a duet. Illogical? Yes, but Star Trek would go further.
It was an episode called Plato's Stepchildren.
Captain's log, stardate 5784.3. Dr. McCoy is endeavoring to treat the leader of a strange group of people.
It's one of the most surreal episodes, actually, if you watch it as a whole.
Where are you going? I don't know. I don't want to go, but I can't help myself.
It was about the Star Trek characters going to a planet where there are extremely powerful beings who can control and manipulate other people with telekinesis. And they beam down Lieutenant Uhura. And they make Kirk kiss her, just to prove that they can make that happen.
I'm so frightened, Captain.
It's weirdly not a consensual scene.
I'm so very frightened.
They're being controlled and forced to conduct what's clearly supposed to turn into quite degrading and degenerate kind of pornographic scenes for the entertainment of these degenerate aliens.
That's the way they want you to feel.
And so Kirk is being forced to kiss Uhura, and they're going to obviously be forced to have sex.
Makes them think that they're alive.
But this was 1968, so the show's producers left themselves a controversy escape route.
What was planned that they would do is they would fake the kiss, and they would turn away from the camera and be filmed from the other side doing a fake kiss. But I love that the actors decided, no, we are going to really kiss. And so they did it, they did the kiss properly. And then the director, right, said they should do one where they do a fake kiss and their lips don't touch. And because the actors didn't want them to use that version, William Shatner made his eyes cross-eyed, and they just flubbed the fake kiss one, forcing the studio to use the actual kiss.
Woman, let's get on with it.
We went back to school the next day, and everybody was talking about this kiss. Everybody was saying, wow, you know, he kissed a black woman. You know, it was like a big, big thing at the time.
At the time, of course, the producers had a sweat on, the network executives had a right bead on over how the Bible Belt would take it. It's impossible, really, almost impossible to imagine what the landscape was like back then.
It was a sign of just how culturally and racially segregated America was at that time. The fact that they were frightened to put this out in case it led to sort of riots in Alabama or something.
Bravo to Nichelle Nichols and William Shatner for breaking the noses of every bigoted white person who took offense at this. Ain't nothing wrong with two people kissing, as long as there's consent.
It's nowadays hailed as a groundbreaking moment, although that's not the whole story.
Everyone talks about this episode of Star Trek as if it's the first interracial kiss on television. It's not. It might be in the States. However, in Britain, Emergency Ward 10 had an interracial kiss as early as 64, 65.
I want to kiss you. What for? Just because.
Joan Hooley was the young lady that kissed the white doctor.
And this, interestingly enough, was overlooked for many years. It's only in the last few years that it's been recognised and highlighted again.
Oh, that's better.
I think Britain is often actually well ahead of America in representing interracial romance. And yeah, I think we should be very proud of that in this country.
1968 may have been a year of revolution on TV, on stage, and on the big screen. But how close did we come that year to revolution? Full stop.
The British didn't do things like that, but in this case we did.
For many who lived through the era-defining dramatic events of 1968, the year stands out as a controversial one like no other.
Well, this is it.
68 was a year of revolutions. Throughout Europe and many other countries.
We felt the foundations of the world were shaking politically. There was a summer of discontent in Paris.
The burnt-out barricades are still in position. The tear gas still hangs in the air. And it started across the other side of the river.
And there were extraordinary events also in Prague, an uprising against the Russians.
All those kind of youthful revolutions going across Europe, whether it was in Prague or Paris, they're all joined. There's a feeling that, you know, the old order is wrong. The old order has to be stood up to, you know.
I went to America for the first time. Parts of the big cities were in flames. New York, Chicago, Wilmington, Delaware. There were tanks on the streets of Washington, D.C.
After 3 days of violence and 2 nights of curfew, there was still a pall of smoke over Chicago's troubled west side. This the scene of some of the worst looting and the heaviest casualties so far.
Looking back on it now, I would say it's the most consequential year that I ever lived through and reported.
And now, 5 o'clock in the morning, the demonstrators dispersing at last.
68, in a way, was the year of student rioting, generally speaking.
The Berkeley campus is once more seething with revolt.
And London had its very own one.
The British didn't do things like that, but in this case we did.
What became known as the Grosvenor Square riot of March 1968 had begun as a peaceful protest against US involvement in the Vietnam War. In amongst the throng that day were young journalist John Sargent.
I had no intention of taking part in a riot, and certainly not of being arrested.
24-year-old PR consultant Nick Hewer.
My office was in Trafalgar Square, and I looked out and I saw all these people milling around. I joined in.
And aspiring actress Stephanie Beacham.
I had an empathy for the whole thing and probably knew a little bit more about the Vietnam War than people generally.
By 1968, America's own Apocalypse Now in Vietnam had been raging for 3 years. Casualty numbers were unsustainable on both sides, but still yet more young Americans were being drafted to fight.
We were shouting and chanting, particularly shouting slogans against the American president, President Johnson, and one of the famous ones was, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids have you killed today?" So that was the atmosphere in which we set off, but in an entirely peaceful fashion.
Opposition to the Vietnam War was like an article of faith among late 60s radical youth.
There were sort of quite well-known left-wing figures from the world of entertainment dotted about. Mick Jagger was spotted. Tariq Ali was there.
I join with the politicians and ordinary people all over the world who are telling your president that the only way to peace in Vietnam is the withdrawal of United States forces from Vietnamese territory.
After speakers, including revolutionary thespian Vanessa Redgrave, the estimated 10,000-strong crowd left Trafalgar Square to march through an unprepared London.
That was a wonderful anti-Vietnam War rally. But it wasn't meant to be Grosvenor Square. It was everybody was going to Hyde Park. But there was a split-off, about 3,000 people. The split-off went to Grosvenor Square.
It was in Grosvenor Square because the American embassy was then on one end of Grosvenor Square.
I went in that direction, saw that it was absolute chaos and that there were a hell of a lot of policemen at the end, and just thought, no man, this is just like not cool, and left.
Very sensible in hindsight, because the Grosvenor Square protesters then stormed the police cordon protecting the embassy, sparking the worst violence seen in London for decades.
It was an extraordinary confrontation between young people and the police. I was fairly near the front, and it soon did get nasty in the square itself. And when the horses arrived, I thought, that's it now. We've had enough. And some of the students were threatening to throw marbles under the hooves of the horses.
The violence probably was the first time we'd seen that level of violence.
both from the protesters and from the police. I mean, there's plenty of testimony that showed that the police weren't angels in this. There was something like 250 arrests. There were well over 100 people injured, and some injured quite badly, no deaths, but that's not the kind of thing we had here.
But we did, provoking predictably shocked and outraged headlines. It would take 5 more years of fighting before American troops ignominiously left Vietnam. Although the shocking events of that day of protest had a lasting effect on some who'd been in the thick of it.
The police were certainly heavy-handed, and I'm thankful I missed the really horrible riots. I thought, I've made my point, and off I scampered with others. And the strange thing is, I never went on a demonstration after that. I was already a journalist, but from then on I was always watching and not taking part.
For another young idealist on the demo, the memory of that day and of 1968, the year of revolution as a whole, is bittersweet.
There was an optimism. We knew that we could change the world. What arrogance. We've done absolutely nothing. We've been the laziest generation ever in the end. Us lot that are all, you know, on our pensions now, we really didn't do anything, but we thought that we had the answer.
If you or someone you know has been affected by any of the issues raised in tonight's programme, please go to channel5.com/helplines for information and support. Coming next, criminals caught on camera.